Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells all regarding family court, criminal court, and other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. And if you have a tale to tell, you're welcome to contact me there as well. On dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com, I have a return guest. Very happy to have Jeff Morgan here back with me. He is in Texas. He was last on my podcast, season 3, episode 119, which was October 3rd of 2022, ironically. Jeff Morgan has two goals in his current legal battle in Texas: save his own marriage and destroy no-fault divorce in the state. When his wife of 11 years filed for no-fault divorce in July in Dallas County, Texas, he responded with a 31-page motion that argues the law is unconstitutional and would force him to violate his Christian beliefs about marriage. So I welcome you back, Jeff. Where are you at with all of this? Because we were talking earlier and you had also been in the ER 2 months ago.
Yeah, there's been a lot of things that have happened in these last few
Right.
months. So the first thing is, Marianne, I'm glad to be back here. I am very sorrowful to be back under these circumstances. As I've told everybody, my number one desire is to keep my marriage intact. And I was very much surprised over this whole thing, but it is what it is. So I found out, in fact, my wife filed for no fault divorce or the insupportability clause in Texas on July the 8th. I didn't even know about it until I think it was July the 30th. In the interim, I mean, like I said, I didn't even know about it. I drove by your house because we're living in two different places right now. She wanted to be separated and she was claiming that she needed to have some space or whatever. It didn't make any sense to me. But at the time that this all happened, Marianne, my mother was in the ER up in Pennsylvania. My
Mm.
mother passed in May. So this is, she was in hospice. She was in senior living center that she went to hospice. And then something happened where I think it was on May the 15th, right around then, that she was in the emergency room. And I saw the pictures and I'm like, am I going to see my mom before she dies?
Oh.
Because I had already had a ticket to go back up there. I'm like, am I going to get there? And I'm thinking to myself, do I need to just drive up immediately and just tell everybody I'm going to be, I'll be there when I get there and tell my work I have to go. It's an emergency thing. Anyway, but so this is what's going on. And I was at work on the 13th and she texted me, basically remove all your belongings out of my home this Saturday. And I'm like, I was really shocked because we had an upstairs place and she wanted to remodel it. And I asked, well, what do you want me to do with my stuff then? And she said, take it down to your house. I have a house in Mesquite because I was renting it out. But then a couple of things happened that I thought, I don't know if I can rent this out or not. There were just some strange things
Mhm.
happening. And I needed to have something that I had some peace in my own heart that if anything did happen, that I would have a place to go. She, in September of 2020, as I don't know if anybody remembers this or not, but her son has a lot of medical needs. He was born dead. He was resuscitated.
Mm.
He's got multiple needs. He's on 24/7 nursing care,
Mm.
paid for by the state. My wife has a couple of autoimmune issues, diseases. I thought it was two. When I found out later on it was actually three. And she's got multiple issues like migraines and various things like that. So um, I know she deals with pain. I know she has other things going on. Oh, excuse me. But anyway, but there were a couple of things that were taking place in September of 2023. She basically said at one point in time, she doesn't like the house that she's been living in, or at least she didn't. And she said, like, if we're not in a new house by the end of the year, we'll be divorced. And I'm like, whoa, I was really very much surprised about that. She informed me that she was looking for a house for her and her son. And I'm like, where do I fit into this whole situation?
Mhm.
Well, where do you want to fit in? I'm like, this is not good right now. So instead of renting out my house here, which I still had some work to do on it, I just decided I needed to have a place it was a little bit of a power equilibrium because we were living in, quote, her house. It was our marital house, but it
Mhm.
was her house in title. And I had a house down here that I was going to rent and use that as income in our retirement. Anyway, it turns out that I did get it set up. I was a little bit afraid to do anything. I had somebody stay here at various times. Didn't charge
Mhm.
anybody rent, but they just were here. And my mom maybe in 2024, I had her down to Dallas for for a couple of weeks. She stayed down here. My sisters come down here. We had Christmas down here because her house is just not set up for some of those things, and it was just easier to do things like that down here. Anyway, so like I said, come in the end of 2024, my mother and my stepdad were moved into a senior living center. Um, my mother was having some type of dementia, and that was hard to watch. And whenever you see a loved one going through those things. There is one thing I will say, though, however, is that as painful as it was, in July of that year, we went to an Orthodox church, and my mother had been, I don't know whether she had been resistant to the gospel, but she just, I don't know, but we were at the Orthodox church, and I said, Mom, look at the ceiling. And they had different vignettes from the life of Christ. And I
Hmm.
took her around the church and I said, this is what this means, and this is this, and this. I sat down and I said, Mom, Carissa, who's my daughter, Carissa wants to know, is grandma going to heaven? And I said, Mom, you got me watching Billy Graham, and that's when I gave my life to
Hmm.
Christ. And would you like to do the same thing, basically? And she said yes. And so I let her in prayer there. And for her to say, like, I'm a sinner and stuff like that, I'm like, well, this is completely different. So maybe that dementia had a place where it brought her back to the place that she could have faith like a child. And that's been the one thing that has given me some hope during this whole time is that, my mom, I hope that she came to Christ, and that obviously that's where she is right now. But anyway, and I was up there in January of this year, and we always have placed a high value on family. Both Karen and I. Family was supposed to be number one. Family, family, family.
Hmm.
And she saw what was going on, so she's like, "Go see your mom and everything." So I went up there end of January, beginning of February. I was up there for about a week. And then I made another trip to go up there in March because I just knew my time with her was short. And that's when this whole escapade happened about move your stuff out of my house, and my mom's in the emergency room. Is my mom going to die? And but I made it back up there. She came through. And Maryann, it was neat because she had lost all this weight and she wasn't eating. But everybody said, Jeff, when you came, it's like her life changed. It was just like just knowing that you were there, she was doing something. And at that point, Maryann, she was so thin. I was just counting calories. She started to eat like 21 meals straight. And I'm like, good. I'm just like ding ding. You just keep counting the calories, right? And so by the end of the time, she looked like she was doing this. I'm doing this for you. I'm fighting for you. I'm really trying. I'm trying for you. But I made another trip to go back up there 3 weeks later. And before those 3 weeks were up, is when she fell in the nursing home.
Oh no, that's
And
bad
that
when
was
they
bad.
fall.
Yeah. And they took her to the hospital, and I was able to get an emergency trip up there. And when I saw her, she definitely was not the same person. She had a DNR, um, and basically just comfort her and stuff like that. And so I was with her, I don't know, maybe 10 days or something like that, 10, 11 days or something. And so she passed in my arms.
Mm,
And
I'm
of course
so,
we had the funeral, but this is with everything else going on in the background, and still trying to figure out what's going on. We went to the church. The church, as you know, Mary Ann sometimes does a horrible job. The church is sometimes, when it comes down to marriage counseling, horrible. In
right,
fact,
right.
I think that the church is partially to be blamed for this stuff, but that's another topic some other time, perhaps, unless you want to delve into it later. Um, but my wife said, she told everybody, "Oh no, I don't want. I want to." She got this idea that somehow, perhaps, that she was reading the Bible or something, and this idea came to her that maybe if she threw me out of the house, it would cause us to miss each other and come closer together. And I'm like, what? I mean, I couldn't believe this.
Hmm.
We already have like an anxious personality versus avoidant personality type there, the push-pull relationship. And I'm like, I miss you right now. And
Oh,
so anyway,
funny you should mention that, but it's not funny. The thing is, when I went through a divorce, um, like I had to live with him after we had the paperwork of the divorce, but I had to stay with him for like 5 months till I could save up money to move into a house. And
wow.
a counselor told me, well, wait a minute, you didn't get a chance to move out and see if you guys miss each other. And I said, well, no, but we got through it. And, once I moved into my farmhouse, in the beginning we kind of missed each other, but then it wasn't enough to get it going.
Yeah. So, and the thing was, the church gave me this thing called a therapeutic separation agreement. And I'm
Mm,
like, what is this thing here? Because it may have some applicability if you have a situation where there's abuse or adultery or something like that. It had no applicability for our situation. And they're saying this is a document that the pastors and the counselors worked on. It was a godless document. It was Marxist. It was Keynesian. And I said, there's no idea in here. You've not even talked about the purpose of marriage because there are covenant separation agreements, whether you agree with them or not, but you still start off to say marriage is an institution by God. This is the purpose of marriage and stuff like that. And the separation can be useful at times under the right circumstances, but this was a disaster. And
mm,
and when, in fact, I wrote, I criticized it harshly. And eventually the pastor said, well, we updated it. I said, well, good. It was a godless document. What wasn't godless? I said, no, it was a godless document. Anyway, that's my perspective.
hmm
But,
hmm
sometimes you get to people in the churches, even pastors, and they don't understand the cultural issues that we're dealing with, the underlying things that normal families are facing. The long march through the institutions of socialism, the thought of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, and the way that got incorporated into Leninist society in Bolshevik Russia, the whole influence of Alfred Kinsey with the sexual revolution and how that destroyed the marriage bonds, and with Hugh Hefner as his pamphleteer,
hmm
and like, so all of a sudden marriage has become like an optional thing. Whereas from a Christian perspective, and from the perspective that I entered into marriage, and my wife as well, we took our vows before God. A man shall leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, the two shall become one. What therefore God has joined together, let no man take apart. I mean, we both made lifetime commitments till death do us part. And
hmm
I always thought that's what that meant. I always thought the vows were there to get you through the rough times, not to say, oh, well, they're just like socially convenient things.
Right.
So, but anyway, so when I found out about the whole divorce filing, and maybe if I don't know if I'm speaking too much on something, if I'm jumping too far ahead, if you have any questions, just go ahead and ask me. But
Well, with your mother passing, it seemed like your wife didn't even
no,
say
she was
anything to
not,
you.
no, well, when her messages of encouragement or whatever, they were supposed to be almost sounded like Dear John letters. And on the other hand, Marianne, her father stayed with us 16 months when he had COVID. He was in the hospital and he was in a nursing home when he got COVID. Took him in the hospital, and I said, you can't let him go back. We have to have him here because I believe that family should take care of family when they
Mm,
can. So he stayed with us, and it was interesting because her kids like, oh, her brothers and sister were like, we hope you don't end up divorced because of this. And it was, it was hard for her. I think it was harder for her than it was for me.
mhm,
I just assumed that, you just take somebody in. This is just, I had been a missionary to the Middle East, and that was a little bit more of the standard that you would have there, the family dynamic. And they kind of had family, but I've heard people talk about family in Texas, and it's not quite the same thing as like the biblical, even the Muslim tradition, because I was a missionary among Muslims.
mhm,
And they actually, in many regards, held family to be more important, at least where I was, than what we do here in America and in Texas.
mhm,
So, but then he went into a nursing home, and I just said, we should also have his wife come up too. And they're like, no, 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 you can't do that. You'll definitely end up divorced. So these people, her two brothers wrote to me, thank you, Jeff. You've been nothing but a blessing to this family. You've done this, you've done that. Our father survived so much longer because of you and Karen. And really,
mhm,
I think, the big pusher behind that.
mhm,
And so, and yet, when I ended up in the emergency room and I texted all of them, not a single person responded back. I mean, I've been very disappointed that the people that, they think you're this wonderful person, you've done this, you've done that, everything else, and then it's Ghostville. Like you don't
mhm,
even exist. They just write you off. And I think that's horrible because I think that, I've talked with other people, especially from other cultures, like in Kenya, for example. One of Matthew's nurses was from Kenya, and we used to talk about marriage and family and divorce and stuff like that. The elders made sure that marriages worked. They did their best. Adultery was not permitted. I mean, it was just like they put some clamps on these various things.
Mhm.
And if people had problems, they made them work them out. And it's interesting because we were talking about the separation agreement. There's a story about this place somewhere in Europe where basically, if people were going to get divorced, they would stick them together in a room and kind of almost like lock the door on them or something. Now that it was attributed that was stated there was only one divorce during that time. I don't know if that's true, if the whole story is fanciful or not. But when you're having difficulties, sometimes splitting causes the difficulties to be bigger in your mind, because something that might start off as small might turn up to be something huge, and there's no correctiveness because and there are times, yes, of course you can have your arguments or whatever, but being in front of a person, looking the person in the eye. I remember Tucker Carlson said something one time. Now, I'm going to give you his version. He just said, if you're having an argument, go to a hotel room. And he was talking about he and his wife, we get together, we just basically they get completely vulnerable before each other, and they work things out, or they'll go on a walk or something like that.
Mhm.
And, the covenant of love, the covenant of commitment, the power of God, the grace of God, the love of Christ should be what keeps you strong. Because in marriage, you have two sinful people. And, two sinful people get together. What do you expect? But what marriage is also supposed to symbolize to a Christian is the relationship of Christ and the church. And so God is saying he's going to take a marriage relationship, two different people that are sinful, and he's going to do something so tremendous. He's going to say, this is the model of what I want people to see. This is the love of Christ and the church. And as a Christian that I am, I've read these people that said the best form of evangelism is strong marriages. Now,
Mhm.
whether you agree with that or not, I don't know. But the question is that when we have marriages that a husband and a wife are divorcing each other, that is a terrible testimony to the gospel and to the love of Christ. And that's where was I upset when my wife kicked that? Absolutely, I was. And at the same time, Mary, I mean, I'm thinking, Marianne, I've got my mom is dying. I had just had COVID. I just recovered from COVID. I was going through a situation at the federal government where they were talking about possibly eliminating my job.
Oh.
I mean, all of these things are hitting like every single thing at once. And then I have an elder that says some stuff that was the most ridiculous, hurtful thing that he could have said. Incompetent, anti-biblical thing. And anyway, so it is what it is. Um,
So you're taking care of this person and they're saying off the wall things to you?
When you say taking care of this person, are you talking about my
Her fa
wife, her
Yeah.
father? No, her father, I'm sorry, I'm talking about a lot of things and skipping around a little bit. No, her father was with us. Her father passed at the end of 2023.
Oh, okay.
So her father and her mother both passed within like 72 hours of each other.
Wow.
And so the week of right around Christmas time, I was at the hospital with Karen. I remember I have a picture of her with her hand reaching out to her mother at 1 in the morning. And we were beside her mom, and I was texting her
Mm.
brother saying, "You may not want to leave. Your mother's, I don't know if she's gonna make it through the night." She did, and then she'd wake up and she'd be like very coherent and everything. But she passed, I think, a couple of days after I visited my mom Christmas time in Pennsylvania. It was the last Christmas time I had with them. But I was up there beside them, and then um, my when I came back that Christmas as well, I came back a couple of hours early, came immediately home, took my wife to see her father. She got to give him her final kisses, and then he passed a couple of hours after that.
Mm.
So, I mean, I'm thinking about myself, the care that I'm showing and being there when she's going through this terrible crisis. And in my case, I don't even have anybody to talk with. And I'm being kicked out
Mm.
of the house. And it's like, well, if you,
Oh,
you can finish moving your stuff out when you get back. And I'm like, my mom, it was
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So,
cruel.
well, yeah, I felt the same way about it. So all of these
Mm.
things, Marianne, I was hurt. And um, the hurt can lead to anger as well. It's
Mhm.
very hurt. And I'm like, why are you doing this? In fact, I even gave her back the wedding ring because the wedding ring was supposed to be a symbol of our covenant with each other. And I'm like, we're supposed to be living together. And what you're doing is completely opposite the scripture. You're kicking me out. I have no recourse. And really, Marianne, I think that maybe I did the wrong thing by leaving. Maybe I
Mm.
should have just stayed. In fact, I even talked about that. I said, what if I don't leave? And then I thought she said, well, that's not according to the plan. And I'm like, what? Now she said she didn't say that, but I'm like, I was pretty hurt. She said, well, that's not the plan. And there were some
Well,
crazy things that I heard, Marianne, that I
well,
just
Jeff, that plan could have been a silver bullet tactic.
I know we don't know that. I have a hard time believing that though, man. This is the thing is when you have the silver bullet thrown at you, and that happened afterwards. When you have a silver bullet thrown at you, you're so caught off guard.
Hmm.
There's absolutely nothing there. In fact, I've had people, a couple of women at work, this one woman at work said to me, Jeff, I looked at you as being a saint when you did this, that you took on Karen and her son. And I've had some guys that have said the same thing, and some guys said, Jeff, just thank her and get out of there because we know what you go. People that have come to our house and have seen the setup,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of care that I gave toward Matthew,
Hmm.
and also too because my wife had all these issues that I mean I tried to let her get some extra sleep and stuff like that as well, and she has a lot of, like I said, a lot of issues. She's always in pain, and a lot of times you don't see the pain, but I mean you always try to, so maybe she's in a lot more pain than I realize. But I was always trying to, like, I really did try to, how can I do things to help her out for the day, for she needs some extra sleep because she doesn't sleep well either. She
Hmm.
might not sleep at all that night, or she might go to sleep at 4 in the morning. And anyway, there were a lot of things that were going on, but I felt like I've done all of these sacrifices, and then I'm being almost like tarred and feathered by the people at the church as if I'm this person that has done all these things. And she even
Oh,
said, she's like, well, I just want to have some time to seek God. And the one elder said, so what I hear you saying is that you don't want a divorce, but you just have a full boat right now, and you just can't, you want to seek God, and you just can't take the baggage right now. And I'm like, now I'm baggage? I'm baggage?
oh, oh,
That was the most insensitive thing that they could have said. They have not walked in my shoes at all. They had no idea of and I'm not trying to brag, or I'm not doing anything like that. I'm just saying the reality was I did a lot of stuff and I was very
mhm,
sacrificial. And I didn't think it was above and beyond. I just thought you do that because you love your wife. You're in a relationship like
mhm.
this. And then to see that stuff get turned against you. And then after the silver bullet comes later. If you want me to jump ahead to that, I'll do that.
Yeah, it's you do so much for family members and then they turn on you like rabid dogs. It's like, well, how did
Yeah,
this happen? And
I
this is
know.
like common,
Yeah,
like your story's not a one-off. This is
I know.
happening. I don't know why. It's maybe the cancel culture, internet, social media.
I think part of the reason is as well as look, we've had no fault divorce in our country for 50 years. So no fault divorce is the easy way out. Rather than work through issues, not
Mhm,
discarding individuals and marriages and families and everything else, we have learned to just like throw some things away and make excuses for it. And kids have seen this. Been taught this for going on the third generation. Marriage
mhm.
is disposable. Family is disposable. I can leave for any reason, for no reason. I can make up a reason. So if I lie about something, what difference does it make?
It's normalized.
It's normalized. It's perversity normalized. The interesting thing is that when no fault divorce was put into place in Bolshevik Russia, within 8 years, the Atlantic magazine had this article talked about Russia's effort to abolish marriage. And the reason they were talking about this is because the societal upheaval was so chaotic that they were like, what do we do about this stuff? And basically because marriage had no legal protection. I mean, if marriage is being married is a legal status and you enter into it, you have benefits that come along with that. One lady, a law professor out of University of South Carolina, I think it is, Marcia Zug, said that when you get married, you gain 1,150 benefits at a federal level, plus additional benefits at the state level. This is a status that you have because you've chosen to get married. And yet, unilateral, no fault, or no defense, we shouldn't even be calling it no fault divorce. We should be calling it no defense divorce because number one, no fault divorce is a lie to begin with.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, it just there's always fault with divorce. It's we've tried to glamorize things. It's not really that bad. We're going to have a good divorce, the no fault divorce. No, no fault divorce is destructive. It's
Hmm.
like in the Old Testament in Malachi chapter 2, it talks about like because only in the Jewish Old Testament, only men could divorce their wives. So God spoke to men not to divorce their wives, and basically talked about divorce as like you have a violent garment. And the idea behind it is like you're stabbing your wife and it's bleeding on the garment and it's getting your garments bad too. When I saw Charlie Kirk, when his assassination, the first thing I thought about is that is the picture of unilateral divorce
Hmm.
because we try to make it sound, well, he died so quickly, he had no pain. Did you see what happened to
Mm.
him?
I
You,
think,
you,
mm,
yeah, it was, oh yeah, it was nice and quick and painless and easy. So therefore, no, it was murderous.
yes.
And we forget how violent divorce is. God hates divorce. He
Hmm.
detests divorce and he calls it violent. And we have tried to whitewash it. And this is the same thing. The socialists have done that, the Marxists have done that, Alfred Kinsey and the Playboy culture have done that. And now the church has been influenced by these things. The church should be standing with the teaching of Jesus and say, divorce should not be happening among Christians. It should be a rarity, not a common occurrence, and we should not be excusing it. Jesus was very, very specific about this. Let what God has joined together, let no man, let no court, let no judge, let no whomever tear apart. There are some reasons for divorce. So I'm not trying to put guilt trips on people, but the way that we have done it today, it's completely, I've got to call it what it is. It's satanic. It's
Hmm.
just not right. And it creates a culture of abuse. It creates, you know, when you look at the broken kids in our society,
Hmm.
I'm like, well, they're basically because they were not brought up in a healthy family and and they did not have the strong extended family around. Families used to be strong.
Hmm.
Family courts destroy families. They absolutely wreak havoc on society. They destroy family. Family courts are not friendly. Oh, that's a family court. Family courts destroy society. Family courts are Satan's playground. They're dens of iniquity. Perjury gets committed all the time. Lying takes place all the time. Attorneys profit off of this thing. The judges act like they're so mighty back there. Family courts destroy families.
Hmm.
Family courts originally had a different intent behind them, but they have been so perverted over the years that now family courts are the place that are like the evil chamber. They're like the Auschwitz in a sense. You go
Hmm.
in there, you know that people are going to come out damaged or destroyed or dead or whatever. But
Hmm.
it's a family court, and we build bigger family courts. I want to see these family courts be consigned to the dustbin of history. I mean, they are torture chambers. They are
Oh,
whatever you want
yes.
to call them. They're hell, and
Oh,
you
yes.
and you've seen the devastation that it's had on individuals, on extended families, on kids, on grandkids. The you know, oh, we are judges, and we have these laws to execute. Yeah, you
Hmm.
have people to execute. You are
Yeah.
executing people and families.
And they don't care.
And they, well, some may, and because I've had judges say, "Well, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this." Well, number one, you don't have to do this, but
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
You know, and I've had this one judge, Brett Hall, said, "Well, I had to do this. That's the law." I said, "No, you didn't have to do this. Well, you just need to go study the law and understand." Actually, he didn't have to. The Texas Family Code says the opposite. The judge may. May is not 100% will and must and everything else. But it brings up a different issue as well that I can get into when I start talking about the constitutional challenge to no fault divorce.
Yeah. So, what are the constitutional arguments with no fault divorce? Uh, because some people don't get it. Like they just figure Well, it's no fault. We just sign a paper and we both walk away. When I lived in England, if they divorced, they couldn't divorce immediately. They had to wait 2 years, then the divorce would be final.
Right, right. And the reason it's supposed to be like that a little bit more is because marriage is the fundamental building block of society. If you have weak families, destroyed families, broken families, you will have a broken society. And we've seen that within our own society. Broken families lead to a really screwed up society and other
Mhm.
things and other perversities. But so when we talk about the issue to divorce, so again, my wife filed a no fault divorce, an insupportability. So I have to go to court, right? And what I did, I filed a motion to dismiss. And I said, number one, because there's no subject matter jurisdiction to the judge. Well, what do you mean there's no subject matter jurisdiction? The statute as written is unconstitutional. But the other thing is, if there's no fault, when you go to court, there should be a controversy. What's the controversy? Why is a judge getting involved in my life when there's no controversy and the pleadings say there's no fault?
Mm.
There's no so, but I just want to change my marital status, and it creates a whole bunch of constitutional issues. So, some people have talked about the due process issue. There is no due process because there is a
No.
predetermined outcome. There's a predetermined outcome, but there's also the flip side of that is the equal protection because two people to the same marriage appear before the judge. The petitioner always wins. The respondent always loses. The petitioner is
Mhm.
the one who wants a divorce. Now, what they get with a divorce, that maybe somebody would say, well, they didn't get everything they could have gotten. I would say if you want a divorce, get your divorce and bye. Don't take the assets that belong to the marital estate if you're going to leave the marital estate. If I leave my corporation, one of the things that they would have me do is go through a checkout process. Did you return this? Did you return that? Here's the computer. You lose access to all of these systems. And yet we think that when you check out of a marriage for no good reason, you get to take out the stuff. You're entitled to some more. And if there are children involved, maybe I get the kids. Why is that? Both people should be protected. And I also think, too, that the kids should be protected. I think that the kids should have a protest voice to say, wait a minute, I'm losing my mom or my dad half of the time at least, maybe more than that. I want my mom and I want my dad. When my parents got divorced, Maryann, I was the anomaly, but
Mhm.
there weren't orders like, you get to see your kid this time and this time. We were able to go back and forth, and we did. It created some confusion, perhaps, but you know what? Had I had to live in this family court system as it is today, I would have been so screwed up. There's a lot of things that I would have been really screwed up over, more
Mhm.
than more than I was. Let's put it that way. Um, but do you want me to continue on with the other constitutional arguments here too?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
so with no fault divorce, the way that it's written, the Texas Family Code, the judge says, "Well, I had to grant the divorce." Well, number one, he didn't have to, but let's say that he did have to. That becomes a legislative divorce, and it becomes a separation of powers issue. So within the Texas Constitution, in Article 2, Section 1, there is a separation of powers. The executive branch does this, the legislative branch does this, the judicial branch does this. The judicial branch is supposed to exercise discretion. But the legislative branch has already automatically decreed that there will be a divorce. Where is the discretion of the judge to deny a divorce? That's why by pleading no fault divorce, it becomes forced divorce, unilateral divorce, divorce on demand, divorce for any reason, for no reason. You can make up a reason, you can lie about it,
Mhm. Mhm.
and but you get it. In fact, in the interrogatories that we submitted to my wife, basically the way they responded back said, there is no defense against no fault divorce.
Mhm.
And what facts do you need? No facts are necessary. It just the petitioner has to have the subjective belief that the marriage is insupportable. What does insupportable mean? Doesn't make a difference. She believes it. What is a legitimate end to the marital relationship? Nobody knows. Actually, that becomes another issue because um, it becomes legitimate ends of the marital relationship for me have a religious connotation. So because I believe that by marrying, entering into marriage under God, the way that I did, making my vows to God, it had a very special religious importance
Mhm.
be assigned to it. It was till death do you part. We're supposed to be reflecting the image of Christ in the church. The Christ in the church can have difficulties, but Christ does not abandon the church. I don't abandon my wife. My Christ in the church may have difficulties. The church may decide it doesn't like what Christ is doing,
Mhm.
but if the church leaves Christ, it is an apostate church. And I mean, so the relationship is always there. That's what the Bible teaches. And as a believer, that's it becomes a religious liberty issue. And in the Texas Government Code 110.003, we have this thing called the Texas Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So back in 1993, Chuck Schumer and Ted Kennedy had the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It was signed into law by Bill Clinton. So it's not a vast right-wing conspiracy or anything like that,
Mhm.
right? And it's primarily it helps in the federal agencies right now. Later in the 90s, they said, okay, it has to be adopted by the states. Texas adopted that. And
Mhm.
basically so that if the state is trying to infringe upon my religious rights, the state has the burden to show why its actions serve a compelling state interest, and they also have to show that its actions are very narrowly tailored
Mhm.
to effectuate the response that will justify it being done in the compelling interest of the state. Marriage is a fundamental right. Divorce is not. Marriage entered into by a Bible believing person like
Mhm.
myself, or maybe other religions too have the same thing. It has a very specific religious connotation to it. And for the state to actually make a determination to say that for any reason, for no reason, somebody can make up a reason, we're going to destroy your marriage, violates the Texas Government Code 110.003. The interesting thing about this code is that back in, I think it was 2014 or so, there were a few pastors in Houston that were preaching about same-sex marriage or something dealing with homosexuality,
Mhm.
and the city council that in Houston wanted them to bring in their sermons so that
Mhm.
they could see what their sermons were saying, and that was used to defend them. And the city council had to yield because pastors have a right to preach the word of God in the pulpits. The state does not get to determine what you're allowed to preach on a Sunday morning. They may not like it, they may, but they do not get to determine that. And by the same token, this applies to everybody. I and my wife entered into a marriage with a specific religious reason.
Mhm.
And my religious rights are now being violated by a judge who thinks that he can grant a divorce. He needs to prove to me why this is a compelling state interest and how granting a divorce would, in the most narrowly possible way, serve that interest. We'll say they somehow achieve the first hurdle.
Mhm.
There's no fault, but somehow we're going to do that. Well, there's lots of ways that they could do that without granting a divorce. I mean, and the other thing they could do is say, well, if we're going to grant a divorce, there's got to be some fault-based reasons. This idea that somehow, oh, I'm just going to make up a reason or something like that. That is completely outside of the state's purview. It's unconstitutional. The interesting thing was in 2001, there was a Supreme Court justice. Her name was Kim Thompson Frost, and she was opining about a case. She was a sole dissent. I thought
Mhm.
that one of the justices used some circular logic, and I'm like, if you would not have used your circular reasoning, you would have aligned with her. But what she said, she talked about this whole issue about marriage being an institution of God. Texas jurisprudence says that it's a religious institution. It's ordained by God. It has certain functions like that. So Texas jurisprudence says it is a God-given institution. And her argument was the statute as it was written by the legislature could not be squared up in any conceivable way to make that statute constitutional. But as we know, sometimes legislators are family law attorneys or they have friends that are family law attorneys. And I mean,
Mhm.
they will pass unconstitutional statutes. The interesting thing is that in Uganda, they were trying to get no fault divorce in there. And they have a constitutional court that looks at the statute. By a vote of 4-1, they said no fault divorce is unconstitutional.
Mhm.
India has gotten rid of no fault divorce because Muslim women were saying there's no due process here. This is unconstitutional. India agrees with them. But Texas, what we have done and what every state in the country has done, this no fault divorce stuff, forced divorce, no defense divorce, as I would say, other than that, maybe better, came in in the early 1900s through Marxist thought. And Lenin forced it upon an Orthodox society. He said that marriage no longer belonged to an Orthodox church, but it belonged to the state. It's a civil status, it's a civil institution, and therefore you could change the whole idea of marriage, and you could make divorce compulsory, or for any reason, for no reason. Like I said, you can make up a reason. But in Texas, we have stated that it has a religious purpose. But in Texas, like every other state in the United States, has adopted the Soviet this Bolshevik meaning, this Bolshevik doctrine. We've claimed that we've defeated communism, and yet we've put communism in our family codes. We put Marxism in our family codes. And I can say without a doubt that our Texas family code is a godless document. And the reason I can say that is because it's over 1,600 pages, and God is not even referred to one time.
Is that because there is a separation of church and state? Is that what they're doing that?
Well, see what they're doing with that. The issue of separation of church and state is very interesting, because what it comes down to in practice is that the state gets to dictate what the church should be doing. Because the church can marry people. And I've told ministers that, look, if you marry two people in the name of Jesus Christ and you perform the ceremony, you're not committing perjury, but you're not telling them the truth. Because the state can, for any reason or no reason, they can destroy that marriage that you've said is solid in Christ. And the participants, one of them can say, I want a divorce, even though they both took their vows to God and stuff like that. The Catholics have a very interesting ceremony, because in order to be recognized as a Catholic marriage, you have to go through certain criteria first. I'm not Catholic, but once you do this, that's the way that you have it in a valid Catholic marriage. In the Catholic Church, the dissolution of a marriage is not permitted. But Catholic marriages go through the same thing. There was one lady because I got the platform changed in Texas for the Republican Party. I think it was in 2020, and because we always had on there that the legislature should rescind no fault divorce laws. I put in the word unilateral no fault divorce laws. And it took a while, but then once people saw that, they just went apoplectic. Like, Texas is coming after no fault divorce. Well, they hadn't come after no fault divorce for 20 years, so don't get too, yeah, concerned about it. But that one word made all the difference to them. That now we're coming after no fault divorce. But like I said, regardless, you can have two people that get married, have an official Catholic marriage, valid Catholic marriage, and one person can basically just still divorce. In fact, there is a case right now that is happening in South Texas where two people are going through this. And in fact, this was a lady, and I was telling her a long time ago, I said, I'm not going to mention her name, but you are the perfect person to test this no fault divorce stuff, because usually people say, well, men just want to keep women trapped in marriages. She wanted to remain in the marriage. The husband was the one that was at fault, if anything. And she was a traditional good wife, but they had a Catholic marriage, and she's trying to preserve her marriage because she's a strong Catholic. This is part of her faith. And so she used the dismissal, the motion to dismiss and the petition for divorce. And she was supposed to be divorced, I think, a week and a half ago. And once they submitted it, the judge had to say, well, we have a constitutional challenge. We'll reschedule this until the end of November. And so it's the exact same thing, because, and one of the arguments was, this is a violation of my religious freedom and of other people's religious freedom. In addition to that, the idea of the religious freedom in the Texas Religious Freedom Restoration Act, there is in our Texas Constitution, Article 1, Section 6, that the government shall not compel in any matter whatever a person to do something that violates his religion. And to me, once again, divorce is a violation of my sincerely held religious beliefs based on the teachings of Jesus Christ. So, but the state will force a divorce upon me. And I think that that's completely that it's just not right. And it violates the Constitution. But as we know, in family courts, where is the Constitution? Let me shred that piece of paper up and burn it and
Right.
stuff like that. Family courts think that they are the Constitution, they are God. Our
Hmm.
family court actors are acting on behalf of a state, and the state in this instance is godless. It's satanically motivated. It's destroying families needlessly in many, many instances. So,
Well, there was a judge, and it made the newspaper where she yelled at an attorney and said, I don't have to follow the Constitution. That made the newspaper.
right, right. But the thing is that that's what the judges believe. I mean, we've had people that have said,
Hmm.
I am the Constitution or I am God in this courtroom. And
Ooh.
so,
Ugh.
it's pretty amazing, but that they would do that. But in addition, like I said, with regard to, and I think I talked about this, maybe I didn't go into it enough,
Mhm.
but the idea of the separation of powers, legislative divorces used to be done legislatively, and then they gave that to the judiciary to have discretion. In our
Yeah.
Texas Constitution, it says that the legislature is forbidden from from making laws granting divorce. And yet, what is no fault divorce insupportability? It is a special law that grants divorce. There's no judicial, because if the judges say, and like I said, I have this one judge on tape, I have to because I'm following the law. Well, wait a minute. Now it becomes a separation of powers issue because the legislature has decreed a divorce with no facts. They don't know anything about it, but they're decreeing divorces, and judges are implementing it, and people are not standing up to challenge this issue. It's a constitutional issue that needs to be challenged. And and people have always talked about marriage being a contract, and it is a contract, actually. But they use this one case, Maynard v. Hill from Oregon, and the use of the case is done incorrectly. But what Maynard v. Hill says is that marriage is more than it's more than a contract. It's more than a contract. It's not less than a contract. And certain contractual issues are at stake, and it also has a social value as a contract. So that is another issue. So I've talked about due process, equal protection, freedom of speech. This would be viewpoint discrimination because with no fault divorce, if they say that you can get a divorce without regard to fault, without regard to conduct, without regard to what your duties are, if you said, well, what duties have I violated? We don't have to tell you. What obligations did I need to do that I didn't do? We don't have to tell you. So what conduct did I do? Well, you don't have to do anything. It's without regard to fault. So now what are you ruling on?
Right.
You're ruling on viewpoint. My viewpoint is that the marriage is insupportable, that it cannot reach the legitimate ends of the marital relationship. There is no test for any of this stuff. It's my subjective belief that I believe this. This is my viewpoint. And the state says, ding, 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 ding. This is the viewpoint we want to hear. So this viewpoint always wins. It's viewpoint discrimination against the other person. I think what's very interesting is that the Supreme Court had a case, I believe it was 3.5 years ago, Shurtleff versus the city of Boston. And Shurtleff wanted to fly a flag above the city of Boston, but the city of Boston said, no, 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 we can't have this happen. It had flown like 270 plus flags, but this one flag in particular, we just can't do that. Why? Because it had religious symbolism. Now it would fly LGBTQ flags, everything else, but this
Mhm.
religious symbolism flag, it wouldn't sign. It would not fly. So they took it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said 9-0 unanimously. This was religious viewpoint discrimination. You're
Mhm.
discriminating against this flag because it carries a religious message with it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so viewpoint discrimination in that case, but any type of viewpoint discrimination, if the state says the moment you say it's insupportable, as long as you say those magic words, we're going to give you a divorce. Based on what conduct, it doesn't make a difference. Did you say the magic words? And your viewpoint, your subjective belief is that this is true. It's unconstitutional to the core. So, and anyway, that's and the viewpoint thing also becomes therefore a freedom of speech issue under the First Amendment. So due process, equal protection, freedom of speech, separation of powers, religious freedom, as I'd mentioned, the contract clause. And I think, I've gone into more of these in detail. Um, but, the first thing is, if it's no fault divorce, what is the cause of action?
Mhm.
There's no fault. So why am I in front of this judge? If there's no fault, why are they putting temporary orders upon me? If there's no fault, why are they demanding to see my papers and my this and my that? Because that now violates the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. Family courts violate every constitutional protection, almost every single one of the Bill of Rights.
Mhm.
It just goes right down the whole list. Well, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. Even like, the NRA people, they should be in there because the family courts can make you give up your gun. For what reason? Well, because of an accusation, because of somebody's viewpoint that this marriage is unsupportable. And then, so when I challenged the issue of no fault divorce, um, guess what? An amended filing came in that is now alleging cruel treatment.
There's your
So
silver bullet.
the silver bullet, no accusations at all of cruelty, but now because of this, maybe we can skirt this issue. So, and I mean, and Maryann, you know that when you're a person that has done, like I said, and there's a lot of people that have said, Jeff, we never would have even entered into the marriage that you entered into because of the hardships that it would have presented. Good people have said this. And now they're going to accuse me of cruelty. I'm the, her
Oh,
brothers, my wife's brothers would not take their father into the home. We did. I practically insisted upon it. And they're going to be silent now that I'm being accused of cruelty when they've already written letters to say that, you kept our father alive. You have been nothing but a blessing to the family. You've taken in both Karen and Matthew. This is the part that gets me. And so everybody's going, well, we need to stay out of this. Get involved.
hmm.
You should not allow this to take place. And then people like to comfort them after people just get broken. Why are you letting people get broken? This is sin. I mean, the people that just sit on the sideline and Maryann, this is what's gotten me in trouble at times because there's a verse in James that says, "He who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin." And I am so afraid of the sin of omission, the sin of being a coward that I mean, I get myself in trouble sometime because I do speak up, and I'm like, I have to speak up on behalf of somebody. I remember when I was in the military, this one guy, somebody tried to consider him to be like a crybaby and something, and they were kind of dismissing him. Well, I actually had information on what took place, and I'm a drill sergeant. Can I talk with you for a minute? Could you mind closing the door? And I told them what actually happened, and I'm like, I was like, good grief, because if they find out it's me, they might come after me next, right?
Oh, yeah.
But he did investigate. It was all true. They, they made the people pay back the guy and everything. But I
Mm.
think we have to learn to speak up and speak out. Cowardice is not a virtue. Oh, we're going to be silent here. We're going to just be, use our discretion to be silent. Cowardice is not a virtue. And especially within the church, it's not a virtue. And that's what, like Charlie Kirk, he got out there, he was in a very hostile environment. He could have been a coward. He could have saved his life by saying nothing. But at what point in time do we say we have sold our souls because
Mhm.
we're afraid? And Maryann, I'm afraid.
Mhm.
You know, of course I'm afraid. And because I know the way the system is rigged right now. If it were, well, you have to do this, you have to do that, all these procedural things, they will get you on procedure and they will violate you and they will destroy you
Mm.
instead. So it's really horrible.
Right. We were talking earlier, like a couple weeks ago, and I was telling you that, I was friends with this one nurse, and she was sitting there at the nurse's station kind of crying. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, well, I'm getting divorced. I said, can I ask what happened? She says, I don't know. I'm just getting divorced. I said, well, is there a reason why you're getting divorced? And she says, I can't think of anything. you know, um, but it's like, but And I didn't push it because it's like we're at work, you know what I mean?
Right, right,
But there should be a reason why you're doing this.
right, right. There should be, and you make a very interesting point right now. I don't know the reason my wife is seeking to get divorced.
Yeah.
And this has been going on since, I mean, she did the stuff and first kicked me out in March. In fact, she said that, she did not want to be divorced. She wanted to work on some things. She even stated that, well, she wasn't sure if it was from God or not. And of course, the elder did not have enough wisdom to say, sorry, that's not from God. This is pretty extreme here. But then she even stated that she wanted to have the time to work on herself and did not want to be divorced. And then, I guess the plan was what? Get divorced? And like I said, Maryann, I'm going to tell you that on some of the stuff, I'm like, this is we're living a false marriage. We should be together.
Mhm.
And with all the things that were going on, my mother's dying.
Mhm.
Like I said, I spent all of my time back in Erie. Spent a month back in Erie with my mother. Couple of weeks in April, and then April and May and stuff like that. And she died in my arms.
Mm.
And and then right beside my mom was another lady, and I could hear her moaning, and I'm like,
Mm.
I had the father come in and said you might want to go pray with him and with her and stuff like that. She died before my mom died, and I was just like, I'm like, wow, that was just an area of death, and I'm not used
Mhm.
to death. I know that some people may be, but I'm just the day before the day that my mom died, Marianne, I I said, I'm going to get up on the bed beside her, just lay beside her,
Mhm.
just be beside her. And and then I took a couple of phone calls. I was on the phone with a friend, and I said, look, I need to go back in and see my mom. I'll call you back later on. And within like I went back in, talked with my mom, told her how much I loved her and stuff like that. And my stepdad came in, and my sister and my brothers, I think they went out to eat or something like that. Nobody expected anything to happen. And I was watching and I said, I think she just died. I think she just passed. And
Mhm.
it was just one of those things that her husband and her firstborn, were there. And and then we had to be there, and they said, yeah, she's gone. And Marianne, I mean, it was one of those things that you think,
Mhm.
last year I took off a month to be with my mom. I
Mhm.
took a month of work off, and it was family friendly sick leave. It was annual leave. I had to leave. I was going to do it. And it was the best thing in the world. It
Mhm.
was the best month that I had with my mom. We didn't always have a good relationship at times growing up. And my mom divorced my dad, and there were things with that, went back and forth and everything. But at the end, you have to forgive, you have to accept, you have to love. And when your parents get older and then they start to regress, in a sense, you're the parent,
Mhm.
and you have to love. And I kept on thinking I'd never taken a month off before. And I just thought, if I don't do this, what's the purpose of taking time off when they're dead?
Right.
And I brought her down to Texas. And the first couple of days, she's like, I don't know if I want to be here. I don't know if I want to be here. And then she loved it. And then I'd call up later on. She's like, are you taking me back down to Texas? I'm thinking I'm going to hitchhike to Texas. Can you come pick me up and take me to
Oh.
Texas? But we had a month together, part-time in Texas, part-time up in Pennsylvania.
Mm.
And I have no regrets over that. It was the absolute
Mm.
best thing.
Yeah.
Whatever mistakes I've made in the past, that was not a mistake. And then, with her being so, seeing that the time was coming up and spending those I've probably spent 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks up there this year as well.
Mm.
It was something else that your family is so important. Your parent, I mean, she was the one that gave birth to me.
Mhm.
And I have memories that, I was the oldest son, so I have memories that some other people don't have and everything. And my mother was not necessarily the best mother in a lot of ways. She was a good grandmother, but she wasn't always the best mother. But I
Mhm.
think it's like a lot of people, they're loving people, but they just maybe they themselves did not know it because she came from a family that was, well, every family is somewhat dysfunctional. I
Yeah.
think almost. I think it's just a matter of degree at this point, right? But um, but like I said, that was the best thing that I did was to spend that time with her. And And given the opportunity, who knows, I might have even have spent more time with her. I was even trying to say, how can I bring her back down? Because when she was in hospice, I'm like, boy, if she's back down to Texas. She loves Texas. She loves my little dog. She loves,
Oh.
can I bring her back down? Can I bring her back down? But things were changing at work, and I'm like, I don't see how I can do this because again, she
Mhm.
had dementia, and I couldn't leave her alone.
Right.
And so, I mean, I was with her like 24/7. She was sleeping in a bedroom. I was sleeping on the floor in the living room,
Hmm.
on an air blow up mattress and everything. And it was interesting because even my little dog, who always sleeps with me, was sleeping with my mom.
Oh.
And it was just like, like somehow he knows this stuff, right?
Hmm.
So, but anyway, but I never told my mom what was happening between, like
Hmm.
when well, both my mom was Karen and my wife is Karen. But when Karen threw me, I never said a thing to her because I just thought if she knew, if she understood, she already saw that happen with my first marriage,
Hmm.
and it would have just killed her. So I kind of protected her from that and didn't really say anything. And even during the funeral, we had pictures, we had the obituary and stuff like that. And I put in pictures of my wife with my mom. And my sister said, you have pictures of Karen in here. I said, yeah, Karen was part of her life.
Right.
And they wrote the obituary and they didn't have her name down because they're already like, okay, there's going to be a divorce here, right? And I said, no. I said, right now, I'm still married, you
Mm.
know, and my goal is still to stay married. I saw my wife today. It was sad. I mean, I've still been trying to reach out, but um, I don't even know what to say there. I still
Mm.
pray, I still hope, but sometimes hope seems to be gone. It's just, it is what it is, and it's all, I don't even know why. I mean, it would be nice, like you said, with that one, like, can you please tell me why? I don't know, because I don't know.
No. Well, my third grade teacher and her husband got divorced back when I was, I don't know, sixth grade at that time.
Yeah,
But my mother was friends with her. And she says, I can't believe they're getting divorced. They're losing their home. They had horses. They had,
yeah.
this beautiful spread, and they would go riding together and this and that. Now they're selling off everything. Okay, so then get this. About 8 years later, they get back together.
Wow, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. And that's, people don't think about that because if there are, these differences that, they're irreconcilable differences, and then they get back together, well, did they commit perjury? I mean, I think the state has a responsibility and a duty that it's shirking on, that it should be wanting to see strong families, and that if there's one person that says this marriage is not irretrievably broken, that the state should grant that person favor and give that person protection
Mm.
versus, like exploiting that person. The whole policy is just so insanely, insidiously evil. And we try to think that, well, it will help speed things along, but speeding things along, efficiency at the cost of all of your constitutional protections is another issue that, it's wrong. It's unconstitutional in itself. And and it's this one other thing that I want to say here too, because the with no fault divorce, and I'm going to give you like a thought experiment or whatever. Okay, so imagine that you're driving in the street, right,
Mhm.
and you see a green light, and green light usually means go, red light means stop. You see a speed limit sign says 35 miles an hour. What if you had one person that said, you know what, I'm going to disregard this. Red light means go, green light means stop. 35 miles an hour is useless. I'm going to go 85 in a 35 zone. And yeah, I no longer even have to drive on the right side of the road. I can drive on the left side of the road if I want to. And you're like, wait a minute, what are you doing here? I mean, it's I, you have one person making his or her own rules about the rules of the road. What happens if 5% of the population would do that?
Mm.
Would you drive? What
Mm-mm.
about 10%?
Mm-mm.
But that's what's happening with no fault divorce because all you need is a subjective belief. The idea that I'm making my own law.
Mhm.
I'm making my own criteria for divorce and I'm enforcing it, and I'm getting the state to back me up. A state will arrest somebody who's going 40 miles an hour in a school zone. In no fault divorce, they're going to say the person going 40 miles an hour in a school zone gets off scot-free. That's the insanity of it. Everybody gets to make their own law, their own rule. And when you think about it, passing a law is difficult.
Hmm.
You have the act, people read it a few times, it's got to go through this discussion, debate, there may be some changing things around and everything. Then they put it out to the public, it's got to be voted upon, or to the legislature, it's got to be voted upon, and then the governor can still veto it. But I mean, it's a process.
Hmm.
With unilateral no fault divorce based on insupportability and what I believe to be true, every person becomes their own law. It's insanity. And if we would not drive in the city where there's lots of cars going because we knew that every fifth person, or maybe even less than that, maybe every other person made up their own laws, we'd be like, this is not safe.
Hmm.
And that's what's happening with marriage today. Marriage is not safe. In fact, we have a policy conference coming up next week that I think I'm going to try to get to. And they're saying it's too like we're going to talk about marriage and having kids and influencing our culture.
Hmm.
I don't know about women, but I know about men. Men do not fear marriage; they fear divorce, and they fear being kicked out of their kids' lives. They feared when you get married, you can lose half of your stuff. They fear you can be put in jail if you can't pay child support. They fear, their wife may go and have an affair and they've got to pay her alimony because now she's filed for no fault divorce, even though she's having an. And again, from a woman's perspective, your things would be different because this is not a gender issue.
Hmm.
It's just that this is what goes on. It's created anarchy in our society. That was the intent. And it was so bad under Bolshevik Russia that when Stalin, the beneficent dictator Stalin, got the power, he had to start denying divorces because it had caused such devastation to society. I remember talking with one guy, his name's Trevor Loudon, great anti-communist crusader. He said, Jeff, you know, it may be that you're going to be doing the stuff at the right time because there's so much damage in our society
Hmm.
that we have no longer the raw material to work with. It may be that they're going to have to start cutting back on some of this stuff. And I've even heard that the Chinese Communist Party is cutting back on some of this stuff. In America, it's wild,
Yeah.
but the communists have seen the devastation. And one of my friends here said, couldn't read the article. I didn't get to read the whole thing, but um, the idea is that even the Chinese Communist Party is saying we're not going to do this anymore. So, but in Texas, unilateral no fault divorce, any reason, no reason, you can make up a reason, and then you get the attorneys because remember, divorce is a business. First and
Hmm.
foremost, divorce is a business. The attorney is going to charge $300, $400, $500 an hour. Then, you're going to have these guardian ad litem. You have this. You have judges that are being paid. You've got kickbacks to the state. If there's children involved with the Title
Hmm.
IV funds, all sorts of stuff. It's a business,
Yes.
and really, what it is a business that is worse than the mafia.
Hmm.
It needs to have a stake driven through its heart. It needs to be
Hmm.
gone forever. And and it also like I said, it violates. I had 11 constitutional arguments against Texas Family Code 6.001. I think they were pretty strong. My wife's first law firm resigned. I don't know whether it was because
Oh.
they, yeah, I don't know if it was because they did not want to be involved in a contested divorce or if they saw the challenge and they're like, this is beyond our expertise. It's going to require this. So she's got another attorney right now, and then they amended the pleadings to allege cruel treatment. That is sick. And you know what happens when you get
Hmm.
alleged for things like that, it
Yeah.
does a big number on you psychologically, as you know, you've been through it.
Hmm.
I mean, I feel like, on the weekends that I should be able to get a lot of stuff done. If I get 4 or 5 productive hours, it's a lot.
Hmm.
Because sometimes you just feel like you're just almost walking, you're surviving it somehow, but you know, this is evil. It's evil, evil,
Oh,
evil.
yeah, I'm sorry you're going through that and having to deal with that. And how are you fighting the silver bullet? I'm sure people are going to wonder what do you do with that?
That's a good question. I don't know yet. I
Mm.
mean, it's just, we have interrogatories. So the first set of interrogatories we had down there were all based on, let me see if I can hold 1 minute here. So the first question was, please state all factual allegations in paragraph 7 of your original petition that do not merely recite the statutory language of the Texas Family Code 6.001. And now the answer is, objection is made to this discovery request as it is unreasonably frivolous, oppressive, or harassing. The respondent seeks petitioner to provide alternative rationale for the petitioner's claim of insupportability. Texas Family Code 6.001 does not necessitate alternative rationales from that provided in the Texas Family Code. Further, the Texas Family Code 6.001 only requires a petitioning party of the marriage subjectively believes that the marriage has become insupportable because of discord or conflict of personalities that destroys the legitimate ends of the marital relationship and prevents any reasonable expectation of reconciliation. Petitioner believes that the marriage has become insupportable for the aforementioned rationale as provided in the Texas Family Code. Like, what does that mean? There's no charge of anything. I'm filing for divorce based on my subjective belief that cannot be challenged because I believe it. And think
Oh.
about this,
Mm.
Maryann. I was thinking about this the other day because at Halloween, do you remember Charlie Brown with Linus and the great pumpkin is going to come and deliver all these toys, all these, he sincerely believed that the great pumpkin was coming. He was sincerely wrong, even though he sincerely, but in the Texas Family Code and in Texas Family Courts, well, they believe in the great pumpkin, so therefore it's got to be true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then another interrogatory, please describe all specific actions, behaviors, or conduct that you contend the respondent was required to perform, because the Texas Family Code says that we have a duty to support and stuff like that. All these actions, these things that the respondent, me, was required to perform during the marriage that he failed to perform. Objection is made to this discovery request as it is improper and not within the scope of discovery. Any party may obtain discovery regarding blah, blah, blah. It goes on like that. Further, the objection is made to the discovery request as it is unreasonably frivolous, oppressive, or harassing. This is what her attorney is having her write down here. The Texas Family Code 6.001 only requires that either party to the marriage may petition for divorce based on the subjective belief that the marriage has become insupportable because of discord or conflict of personalities. It destroys the legitimate ends of the marital relationship and prevents any reasonable expectation of reconciliation. Petitioner believes, yeah, I believe,
Yeah.
that the marriage is, what does this mean? You are now talking about divorce based upon belief, or so whose fault is no fault divorce? It doesn't have to be anybody's fault. I just believe it. There is no fault. No fault divorce has no fault, or insupportability. It's really not called no fault. It's what we've called no fault. No fault is the lipstick of the pig. It's for marketing purposes. It's no defense divorce. It's unconstitutional divorce. But so long as I believe that the marriage has become insupportable, I get the divorce and I get the goodies. If you want to leave the marriage, leave the marriage. But I like I said, if I want to leave my company, there's a process, Jeff. You can't take the computer with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leave it behind. And so Texas 6.001 does not require evidence of specific acts to prove insupportability. That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. Interrogatory number 3. Please describe all factual information, evidence, circumstances, or events other than your own opinion, allegation, or self-attestation that support your contention that this marriage has become insupportable under 6.001. Objection is made to this discovery request as it is unreasonably frivolous, oppressive, or harassing. The adoption of no-fault divorce dispenses with any burden to establish the source of the conflict rendering the marriage insupportable. And that's in regard to the marriage of Richards in 1999. The Texas Family Code does not require the petitioning spouse to provide any specific instances to prove that the marriage has been rendered insupportable. Rather, the petitioning spouse only has to possess the subjective belief that the marriage has become insupportable. The petitioner must provide evidence of their own subjective belief that the marriage has been rendered insupportable. So I'm going to be my own attestation to my belief that may be incorrect. It's like, I mean, if you believe in a flat earth, that's fine if you want to believe that.
Mhm.
But scientifically speaking and everything else, the earth is not flat. So, but in family court, the flat earth hypothesis wins. That's the way it's done in family court. A wife's testimony that her marriage was irreparable due to discord or conflict of personalities between her and her husband, together with her testimony that there was no chance of, I can attest to my own thing. I've made up my own law, I made up my own standard, and I get the divorce and I get the goodies from the marital estate. That was the prima facie case for no fault divorce under 6.001. We also said, please state the specific meaning you ascribe to each term based on the factual circumstances of this particular marriage as alleged in your original petition. Insupportable means legitimate end to the marriage relationship means conflict/discord that prevents any reasonable expectation of reconciliation means objection is made to this discovery request. And it is improper and is not within the scope of discovery. A party may obtain discovery regarding blah, blah, blah. The definition the petitioner ascribes to the terms listed in this request are identical to the definitions Texas Family Code 6.001 ascribes to these terms. Texas Family Code 6.001 does not prescribe any definitions to these terms. There's no definitions. In fact, after this was passed, 6.001, they tried to have a bill that would define some of these terms. They didn't pass it. So these things are nebulous. They have no definition. But the petitioner ascribes to the terms in this request the identical definitions that the Texas Family Code ascribes to these terms. Texas Family Code doesn't provide any terms. And it's important because if you look through different codes, they will tell you this means this. The terms are defined. These terms are not defined. So it's whatever anybody thinks that I want them to mean. And then the last interrogatory, please state whether you contend that the court has the discretion to deny your 6.001 petition, and if so, identify all categories of evidence that could justify such a denial without regard to the fault standard. Objection is made to this discovery request because this discovery request is broad, uncertain, and unintelligible, that the plaintiff cannot determine the nature of the information sought. They're basically saying, can a judge deny a no-fault divorce, yes or no? Well, we don't know what that means, because if the judge cannot deny the divorce request under 6.001, it leads credence to the fact that there is a predetermined outcome. There is no due process. The whole thing is a sham.
Yeah.
I asked the judge one time about this. He said, well, if you really didn't agree with this, you could have brought in witnesses. And I said, so if I would have brought, I could have had he would have had a jury trial right there. I said, so if I'd have brought in 20 witnesses and they all disagreed and said that this marriage was completely supportable, would you have changed your verdict? Well, I don't know.
Oh.
And he was the guy that said, I had to do it because I'm following the law. So he was also caught up in a bind because I have to do it, but I'll give you a jury trial. But can you change your verdict? Well, I don't know. He knew he was lying. And maybe he just didn't see the inconsistency within himself. But
Well,
anyway,
he didn't want to see it.
yeah, they didn't want to see it. So anyway, these are 5 interrogatories. So now probably the next thing would do, because now that the petition has now been expanded a bit, let me see if I can get that petition up here. Okay. Let's see.
Because also we were talking earlier that you had to go to the ER 2 months ago yourself.
Yeah, I did.
Because all this stress takes a toll on a person.
Right. It does. It does. And like I said, I mean, so they're trying. So what happened was interesting is that, you're not supposed to be served via email, and they tried to serve me via email. And I looked at it. I'm like, do I open it? Do I not open it? And I thought, okay, I guess I'd better open, at least see what it is and so on. But I saw something in there that said, well, they're trying, like, for you, just as a matter of housekeeping purposes and to ensure procedural due process. It's interesting. They wanted to know, they had to make sure that the service was done to maintain procedural due process, but there's no other due process that takes place in the whole hearing. And I was challenged in the jurisdiction of the court because I have done nothing wrong. I'm a legally innocent human being. What is my fault? You don't have any. Then why am I in front of this court? You are supposed to determine if there's a controversy between us, if I've broken some law, if I've broken no law, if there's no controversy, and instead you're ruling upon her opinion versus my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
you have no jurisdiction. That is the issue. So, but now what they come down to again, they've the grounds for divorce, cruelty. Respondent denies being guilty of. Oh wait, that was my response to them. I'm sorry.
It's
I
okay.
thought that I guess I don't have the document here. I thought I did. Hold on a second here. Temporary orders. I guess I must be missing a document in here that there was the original petition. Yeah, I guess I need to put a document in that I was missing because they've amended the first amended petition now claims that cruel treatment. And I'm like, this is insane. So I had to respond back first and say that um, you know, grounds for divorce, respondent denies being guilty of cruel treatment toward petitioner of any nature that would
Mhm.
render further living insupportable. And by the way, in Texas case law, I believe that this is a pretty high. I think my dog's going to start barking here in just a moment, so
Oh,
if I need
that's
to close the
okay.
door.
That's okay.
I mean, why would they even say this? Because let me close the door real fast, okay? Can you hear
Okay.
the dog?
I can't hear. Uh-uh.
Okay, okay, good. If you can't hear, that's fine then.
No.
Um, but if the if insupportability demands no conduct, no fault, why would you have cruelty as a fault? Because you actually have to prove cruelty. And there's no
Right.
way to, there's Marianne, I know I was not cruel. And
Oh,
I mean, so it's like, why are you putting this in there? This is the silver bullet, is what they're trying to do. And so,
wow.
and it's very interesting because I've been thinking like, what do I do with this thing? Because again, you're being accused of cruelty. If people had any idea the extent that I went to, the sacrifices that I made to help serve, was I a perfect purpose person? No, absolutely not. But I was a really good person.
Right.
And I there were times that yeah, you get frustrated or whatever, but I really did a lot. And I'm like, now you're gonna say that I'm cruel? I mean, and people are saying, Jeff, good people, I never would have done what you've done. And
Hmm.
one woman at work said, I always thought you were a saint because of this. And I've had men say the same thing. And I just think that, I had an uncle with Down syndrome growing up. So I
Hmm.
didn't really give a lot of thought to it. I was just used to, you make these things and I used to take him around to places. I'd take him to church with me and stuff like that. And I worked at like the Gertrude Barber Center where they had people with handicaps and everything.
Hmm.
Matthew's a little bit different because he's got multiple issues. He doesn't eat. He does for himself. He gets fed through a feeding tube. They carry him around the house on a sling. He can't walk.
Hmm.
He can't talk. There was one time that I heard him laugh it was really quite funny. There were times that I've watched him and I'm like, he laughed at a joke and I'm like, did he really get that joke? Maybe he
Yeah.
did. I don't know. So I'm not saying that there's nothing going on inside, but there's a lot of things that he can't do. And then there's other things he smiles and everything else. And so he does interact with people.
Hmm.
But like I said, when it comes down to his care, if he's not fed, if he's not taken into the bathroom, if his diapers are not changed, and
Yeah.
and if breathing treatments are not done, and I did all of that stuff.
Right.
And I mean, and now you're going to accuse me of cruelty? And then it was not just even with when my father-in-law was living with us. I mean, see, sometimes you get up at like 5 in the morning, be yelling for me, and I'm like, I have to go to work, yelling for me to come down and help him. And
Hmm.
I might have needed to change my father-in-law's diaper or take him into
Uh-huh.
the restroom. And I'm like, and I said, you know what? You basically they had the money. I'm like, you need to get somebody in here. This is not something that I should be doing. This is
Right.
not something that I should have to do all the time.
Hmm.
And I mean, if I were a nurse's aide or something, that might be one thing, but I'm going into work and I'm getting up early and I'm like, some things were just like pushed a little bit too far
Right.
to me. And I mean, and then there are other issues I could talk about my wife's stuff. I don't know if that's appropriate here though, because of, she had lots of issues that I had to take her to a lot of appointments, a
Right.
lot of appointments. If you're taking, um,
Hmm.
40, 50, 60 hours of sick leave in a year, so
Oh,
that,
you are a saint. You are a saint. I've known you
um,
for years, and she's gonna be sorry she leaves you because you're a super nice guy. I mean,
yeah.
you're quite the catch.
Well, thank you. I don't know if anybody really says that, but thank you.
Can you get your the people that know you like write letters of mitigation?
There have
And
been a lot of people that have said when I, because I'd mentioned to some of the people that what I'm going through and everything, and they're like, "You have an army behind you," because Maryann, I've traveled throughout the state. I've been I don't have a slam the gavel podcast, but I have used my YouTube the best that I could to try to expose some of these issues. I've traveled throughout the state. I mean, sometimes I've gone a couple hundred miles, and I've in almost every instance, I've paid my own expenses. I've taken time off of work. I've rearranged my schedule. I mean, I've tried to do things like that. Um, and I mean, every so often somebody would give me a little money or something, for which I was grateful. But I wanted to say this cannot happen. I do not want this system around for my kids and my grandkids.
mm,
You love your kids, but who you really love is your grandkids. So just the fear is that your grandkids would come up to you, Grandpa, did you know that this could happen? Grandpa, did you try to do anything? And
mm.
I just want to be able to say, you know what, I want this system to be destroyed so that my grandkids are not destroyed by this system.
Oh,
And
exactly. Yeah.
so, but yeah,
People
right
don't
now
know.
this is a big battle. And right now, Maryann, I mean, I've told people, I said, just please pray. This should not be happening. And
Mhm.
but the thing is that there's so many people who know us both, and they do nothing.
Oh,
And
hmm.
yeah, and that's the part that's so frustrating because I mean, I've had police called on me because I was trying to help people keep their marriages together or let somebody see their kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's insane. And I mean, this what was the financial reward for me doing that? There was no financial reward. It was
Mm,
just that, it's right or it's wrong. Children need both parents.
hmm.
Do not take the child away from the mother or the father. They need both parents. And like I said, Maryann, had I been brought up in Texas in today's environment when my parents got divorced, it would have destroyed me.
Mm.
And, I've gone through some of the alienation with a couple of, well, with my kids. And, fortunately, two of them were back together again. There are still things that come up at various times, right? But my
Hmm.
third one, I was watching the grandkids there, and then I got falsely accused of something that everybody knows is false. In fact, my wife was up there defending me in front of the court. So, I mean, I've got her own testimony right here, and now she's
Hmm.
going to accuse me of cruelty after she said this. It seems a little bit strange,
Yeah.
you know. And but anyway, so I mean the whole thing about alienation and what takes place, if it's a no-fault divorce, why is a parent-child relationship being put on the altar to be sacrificed
Hmm.
simply for the profit of either an attorney or the appearance that we're doing something judicial or whatever?
Oh,
It's insidiously evil. It's sick to
it
the
is.
core.
I agree with you.
So.
I'm so glad we talked about this. I could talk to you all all day. How can people reach you if they have any questions?
So I am in the process, and I say I am in the process. Actually, I have a friend who's doing this for me. I do have the website right now, jeffintexas.com, www.jeffintexas.com. It's under construction. I am assuming that I will have email there,
Okay.
probably jeff@jeffintexas.com, but currently I don't have that set up. I have to, in fact, you just reminded me I have to send this guy a few things. He's going to put some stuff together. And that would be the best way. You can always follow me on my YouTube page. I
Oh,
have, it's Jeff if you could look up Jeff and Jordan, but I think that the best thing to do is if you look up Jeff Morgan, No Fault Divorce. I own a ton of videos out there. So, or Jeff Morgan CPS or something like that. You'll see my picture down there. I think it's a picture of me with my dog.
oh,
And click on subscribe. Then, by the way, yeah, please don't, I never have asked people to subscribe for the most part. I've just thought I'm going to put things out there. I don't have my channel monetized. I want my channel to be, I don't want ads to be in the way. But at the same time, I understand that maybe that's the wrong move because maybe if there are ads, maybe YouTube would push my stuff so that they could make revenue. I don't know.
I'm always asking for subscribers, so don't feel bad.
Yeah, but and there's a lot of things that, I've dealt with family court issues, no fault divorce, CPS, grandparents' rights. I
Mhm.
do get political at times, so if people have a different political persuasion, don't be offended. I'm very open to discuss anything, but I don't get easily offended. But the family court system has to be burned down. It
Yes.
is the most evil thing facing our society. It's destroying our society. It will destroy our kids, our grandkids. It will you destroy the family unit. You're
Oh
destroying
yeah.
churches, you're destroying schools, you're destroying children of divorce are at risk for so many issues. Um, they won't often achieve the same success levels other people. Some people overcome it. But I
Mhm,
mean, as a rule, children of divorce are broken and silenced. They're
mhm,
being told that, you have to be strong. Lies are being told about children of divorce. The children of divorce don't believe, but they're also shamed to come out and say something.
mhm,
And maybe they're just like, this is the way that I deal with it. Um, but I wish that all the children of divorce, adult children of divorce, because we have found our voices in a sense, and we know the damage it's done to. No fault divorce has done damage to me. I know that.
mhm.
Maryann, this is something that I don't think I mentioned this to you, but last year I found out that my father was not my biological father.
Mm.
I mean, I found out my brother gave me a call. He knew about this for 45 years. He was never allowed to tell me. And then I found out that, all of a sudden everything has changed. And it does not mean my father and I didn't have a relationship, but I found out then that my biological father,
Wow.
I didn't even know that I had, was my biological father. I went out to meet him last year, and I have a couple of half brothers out there as well. I have a half sister who didn't want to meet with me for probably wanted to meet with me, but not under the circumstances with her father. And I found out I went to school with a half brother that I didn't know about, but my whole family structure
Wow.
changed. I
Mhm.
thought I was British and this, that, and all of a sudden I find out I'm Irish and American, which I kind of thought that was a little bit funny because people used to say, well, you're so penny pinching, you've got to be Irish.
Ah!
And and then the other thing is, my friend, the nickname they call me is the Godfather. So I'm like, between the Godfather and the penny pinching stuff, who knows? Maybe they saw something I didn't. But like I said, so and then I remember thinking last year, I thought you start thinking about yourself and you're like, well, I don't know what's true anymore about
Mhm.
certain things because here I am at 63 years old last year when this happened. All of a sudden, everything has changed. I'm no longer technically I'm a Morgan, I'm a rabbit. I actually am related to Eddie Rabbit somehow. But and there's just a number of things that took place, and I'm like, I could get Italian citizenship possibly, and I'm like, it's just crazy, right?
Mhm.
And but imagine, okay, so I've lived my life pretty normally for the most part,
Mhm.
but imagine people that are know that there's a father or a mother out there and they can't form that bond and they know that they're there. I didn't know. It was a surprise. I was pretty stable when I found out. Okay. I don't know that it had a big impact on me, but imagine what happens to kids that grow up
Mm.
without knowing the father or their mother. And I think that that's part of the reasons why we have some of these other things going on, like the trans stuff. Where am I? Am I a boy or am I a girl? Well, if you actually saw a mother and a father together interacting, your mother and your father interacting together in a household, you would understand. Fathers do this, mothers do this. Sometimes
Mhm.
they cross over and do things, but generally speaking, fathers do this, mothers do this. Mothers teach children this, fathers teach children that. And you need both of them to become the adult that you should be. If you don't have them, do you lose your identity and then you try to figure out, well,
Mhm.
maybe I'm trans, maybe I'm this, maybe I'm a rabbit, maybe I'm a
Mhm.
cat. People that are going in as a cat to school,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean crazy stuff. So,
Or
but
they hate that one side of them that was that parent, so then they try to
right.
flip. That's
Yeah.
another podcast. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I don't know enough about that to speak intelligently about that, but I do know that if you don't know your other parent, I mean, when I went to see, my natural father, we had a great time. And I got to meet like I said, my two of my half brothers, and my biological dad and his wife and everything. But Maryann, we have not known each other for 63 years.
Oh.
So 64 years by the time I got there. So and I've still call him every several months or something like that. And we talk a little bit, and he's going to be 90 years old, and very, very active, very bright and everything. Um, and I have characteristics from him, but I think about something else, Maryann. My father was not an entrepreneur. But my biological father was. All of his kids are entrepreneurs, and I'm like, well, what did I miss from that?
Mhm.
I might have had a completely different trajectory in my life. And I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying I am where I am right now.
Mhm.
But what are our children missing when they don't have both parents and when they don't have both grandparents in there? When I was a kid, my favorite stuff to do was to go to my grandparents. You
Oh
know,
yeah, me too.
yeah, yeah. I
And
remember,
you need to know your medical background. I think
right.
they're all missing this point that there are illnesses that are passed down through the generations, and they need to know what their parent may or may
Yeah.
not. This is not good.
And I'll tell you, in my case in particular, because there are things within my family that are some illnesses that you might want to know about from a mental perspective, but
Hmm.
you know, my father, my biological father, and my mom, both lived near 90, so I think that that's probably a pretty good thing for me going forward. But my mom's mom had some issues that there were issues that are involved. But like I said, I thought about these things about with my dad and everything. I'm like, well, wait a minute, none of that counts. None of that counts. I'm not, and then I found out about my dad as well because he had issues that took place that I'm like, wow, we thought that he was born of a single mom, but then we find out that actually no, he knew his father, but his my dad's mother's mother would not let his mother accompany her father as he wanted to move out west. So he remembered the day that his dad walked out of his life, started a
Mm.
new family. And you're like, and I saw the impact of that on my dad.
Mm.
And it takes a generation or two for that to overcome because that impact that he felt was passed on
Mhm.
to me then as well. And you have to take certain steps. And we each,
Mhm.
my sister and my, one or two of my brothers have talked at various times and we're like, how did we turn out semi-normal?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I'm normal, but some in case those that want to disagree with me, but you're like, how did it turn out this way? How did we were all there for the death of my mom.
Uh-huh.
And when I found out different things, I'm like, good, I had no idea because I remember sitting with my brother and my sister. I know that we've already kind of signed off, but these stories just keep coming up to me. And I said, do you ever feel like we were brought up in two different families? Because with divorce, that kind of happened. And that's when my brother later on said, you remember when you asked this question? Well, Jeff,
Mm.
you're actually not a member. So here I think I'm the oldest brother of a brother and two sisters, and I find out I'm the sole child, and I've got, six half brothers and two half sisters, and I've got other ones that have passed on already. And
Mhm.
you're like, okay, this is just very wild.
That
So
is. That is. Well, that's a good story for everyone to hear because you just never know, right?
you never know.
Oh my goodness. But hey, don't jump off, okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Slam, Slam the Gavels, a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and Spreaker, other platforms I don't even know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you, Jeff Morgan, for all your input on all of this and explaining no fault divorce. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann. Remember, whose fault is no fault divorce?
Yeah,
Nobody's, right?
right. Thank you.
Sure.